take and every action they make. So that starts as young as this age. Does everyone get that? Is anyone confused so far? Okay. So the second stage of cognitive development is called the pre-operational stage, and this happens between 2 and 7 years old. I also want to note that the age ranges that are listed as we get more and more into the stages, they're really broad ranges. Like a 2-year-old is very different than a 7-year-old, obviously, but we're just saying that from 2 to 7, these processes slowly start to happen gradually. So some major characteristics of the pre-operational stage is that children begin to think symbolically. For example, the alphabet. You start to learn to read. You start learning the alphabet and you learn that, okay, this letter makes this sound, and if I put these letters together, it makes a word. So very simple things like that. They learn that pictures represent objects, so they start to learn, oh, if I see a picture of something, oh, that's a bunny, that's a car. They also start to be very egocentric. Can anyone tell me what egocentric means? Does anyone know? Yes. Close, yeah, so you're very close. Not highly of themselves, but they think only around themselves, right? They're still young, they don't have the ability to have like empathy or to see things from other people's point of view. So egocentric is like you think about how the world affects you and you only. Lulu. Right. Yeah, exactly. They're very much in like their own little bubble, right? Is another way to say it. Thank you. Yeah. So while their language is improving, they start to learn to talk. They become more fluent in whatever language they're learning to speak. They still think very like concretely. Does everyone know what concrete thinking means? It's like very literal. Like they don't have the ability to think abstractly. So I have a link here. I'll try and click it, but I'm going to explain it first. So basically, a good example of something that happens in this stage 2 is something called observational learning, which is very self-explanatory. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's learning through watching the environment around you. So a very famous experiment that was done by a psychologist named Albert Bandura, and it's called the Bobo doll experiment. Has anyone heard of this before? You have? Good. Do you want to explain it? Okay, Lulu, do you know? Okay. Does anyone know what a Bobo doll is? A Bobo doll? Have you heard of it? I feel like they don't really exist anymore. Lulu, do you know? Okay. So a Bobo doll is basically like a big blow-up doll. It's like a life-size like balloon doll. So what they did in this experiment is they had kids sitting in another room with one-way glass. So the kids could see into the glass, but whoever was in that room can't see the kids. And in that room was a Bobo doll and an adult. They were researchers, but they called them like actors. But they were part of the experiment. So what the actors would do is they would like hit the Bobo doll, they would kick it, they would throw it in the air, and they would demonstrate really like aggressive behavior with the doll. And then after that, they would have the kids go into the room, and now the researcher would be on the other side watching the kids, and they wanted to see what the kids would do with the doll. So they found that the kids would throw the doll, kick the doll, be aggressive like the researcher was, but also they would do things that like even the researcher didn't do. So for example, they would have like, toy guns on the side, then the kids would go pick up the guns and pretend to like, hit the doll with the gun. And they even saw that they were using like more aggressive language. So even things that the researcher didn't do, they found the kids doing because they observed that aggressive behavior. It's a really cool experiment. I have like a little clip of it. So I'm just going to skip ahead.
New York.
So also, this video is very, very old. It's like, this was a very old experiment, so don't mind that. But the person talking in the background is actually Albert Bandura. Like, I think he only recently passed away, but he was a more modern psychologist.
The model hung on the doll with the mallet, flung it in the air.
So that's the researcher.
Kicked it repeatedly. Threw it down and beat it.
And these are the kids that were watching the researcher.
It was once widely believed that seeing others vent aggression would drain the viewer's aggressive drive. As you can see, exposure to aggressive modeling is hardly cathartic. Exposure to aggressive modeling increased attraction to guns. Fewer of them were modeled. Guns had less appeal to children who had no exposure to the aggressive modeling. The children also picked up the novel hostile language.
So you get the gist of it. So you saw that even though the researcher didn't even model holding a gun, that the kids ended up picking up a gun. He said that they used hostile language, which the researchers weren't even talking during that part of the experiment. So it just goes to show that, we always say, like, I have a picture of a monkey here because we always say, like, monkey see, monkey do, right? Like, kids will copy anything that they see the people around them do, and that really starts to show in this stage of development. What they say too, yeah. So it starts out with like what they see because kids don't have the ability to speak yet, but also what they say is when they get older and they start to learn more and more language. So does anyone have any questions about this stage of development? Are you guys remembering what I'm saying? I'm gonna quiz you at the end. Okay. So the next stage of development is called the concrete operational stage, and this happens between 7 to 11 years of age. So some characteristics of this stage is that children will begin to think logically about concrete events. So remember before I said that they think very egocentrically about the world around them. They think, what is affecting only me? Then in this stage, they start to think with more logic. It's still kind of egocentric, but they start to think more deeply about, what's going on around them. They start to understand concepts like conservation. Does anyone know what conservation is? Okay, so conservation is a concept that it's simple. It's hard to explain, but it's simple. Like, if I have a water bottle like this, the water bottle is tall and it's thin, right? But if I have a bowl that is wide and like shallow, and I pour this water into that bowl, it's still the same amount of water, right? Like, this doesn't have more water because it's taller, right? That's what conservation is. Does that make sense? Exactly, yeah, that's a great example, thank you. If a kid is playing with Play-Doh and you have like a big ball, a big lump of Play-Doh, it looks like a lot of Play-Doh. But if I smush it out and I flatten it, they're gonna think like, oh, that's not a lot of Play-Doh, but it's the same amount of Play-Doh, it's just a different shape. Does that make sense? Thank you. So in this stage, they start to like understand that no, it is the same amount of whatever it is. So in that way, that shows that logical thinking, right? Like they start to understand those things, but their logic is still pretty concrete at this point. They start to use inductive reasoning, or otherwise known as generalization. A good example of generalization was done with an experiment. The little boy in this picture, his name is Little Albert, and they did a very unethical experiment on him that would not be allowed today. But basically what they did was, so in this experiment it shows generalization, but it also shows something called classical conditioning. Has anyone heard of classical conditioning? You guys have? Yeah. So that's a whole other thing, but I'll tell you what they did. So what they did was they had this baby, his name was Albert, and in the picture he had a pet bunny. It was a super cute bunny, and he loved the bunny. He used to play with it, touch it, whatever. And then so they would take the bunny away, and then they would replace the bunny with like a little mouse, also like a white fluffy animal, and he loved the mouse and he would play with the mouse. And then after he got used to the mouse and he started to like the mouse, what they would do was they would make a really loud sound, like bang something or hit something or shout, and then it would scare him. So then he would be like, okay, that was weird. So then he would keep playing with the mouse, and then when he would go to touch the mouse again, they would make a really loud sound again, and it would scare him. So he started to associate the loud sound with the mouse, so then he became scared of the mouse, right? So the idea of generalization is that they took the mouse away, and then they gave him back his bunny that he really loved. But he was also scared of the bunny. Why would he be scared of the bunny? Jasenia? Exactly. Perfect. So it had similar traits as the mouse. It was white, it was fluffy, he liked to play with it, it was cute. So in his head, because he was so little, it was all the same, right? It was like the same category. He associated them with each other. So that's what generalization is. So he was a baby in this, but in the concrete operational stage, they start to kind of break free of that idea of generalization. And they generalize not so literally like in this experiment, but they generalize with ideas, with concepts, right? Because we said that they're learning to think more logically. So they start to generalize with logic, not with literal things, if that makes sense. Everyone good on that? Okay. So this is the last stage of development. It's stage 4, and it's the formal operational stage. So this happens from 12 years and older, which is a really broad range, right? 12 until you die basically. And that's just because as we grow older, we're always learning, right? We're always acquiring information. There's no point in your life where you stop learning anything, right? So it's called the formal operational stage. And in this stage, adolescents start to think abstractly and they start to reason and hypothesize. And teens think more about moral, philosophical, ethical issues around them. That's why I have a picture of, does anyone know who Greta Thunberg is? She's like a really young climate activist, but these ideas start to happen in this stage. And kind of the opposite of generalization happens. They use deductive reasoning, which means it's the opposite. Like they'll take general principles and start to hone in and come up with specific hypotheses and ideas. And that's how all these really creative people and activists and things like that come up with their ideas. It's through deductive reasoning. So pretty simple there. Does anyone have any questions about that? Yeah, that's a great point. So it's not that they don't make friends when they're younger, it's that they make friendships, but the way that they engage and play with people around them is very selfish, right? So in the first stage, they will, you might have two kids, two babies playing with toys, but they're sitting next to each other and they're playing next to each other, but they're not playing with each other, right? And as you grow older, your friendships and your social interactions start to become more collaborative. They start to play with each other, work with each other, as opposed to just side by side. Kind of like we talked about egocentrism. That happens later, but yeah, as you grow older, you start to work more with the people around you. Good point. Okay, so we're gonna review now. So this is the first stage, the sensory motor stage. Who remembers what age range this is? Samantha. 0 to 2, good. And what happens in this stage? Yes. Uh-huh, good. Good, good. What else? Yes. Good job, yeah. The action-reaction concept, good. Anyone else? Marona? Yes, object permanency, good job, yeah. So they start to understand object permanency. So yeah, they explore the world around them through basic reflexes, senses, motor responses. A lot of times, kids in this age will start to exhibit like developmental delays, whether that's through speech or motor delays, but this age, usually 0 to 3, not so much 0 to 2, is the age that they really catch up on all that stuff. And it's a really important developmental stage. Katie, yeah, early intervention. Yeah. So it's not bad. Every kid really develops at their own pace. This is like the general, like, outline that these researchers put in place. That doesn't mean that everyone is going to abide by these, like, years, right? 0 to 2. It's not that concrete. Development is so fluid. A lot of kids do catch up, like I said, so if they are experiencing developmental delays, they do end up catching up. Especially when they start like preschool and stuff, interaction with other kids really helps with development. So it's not to say that they'll be behind. Obviously, some people have like learning disabilities and other types of disabilities that would affect that, but generally speaking, a lot of kids will catch up even if they are a little bit delayed. Next is the pre-operational stage. Who remembers what age range this is? Yes. 2 to 7, good job. And what do we see in this stage? Yes, good. And egocentrism, right? Observational learning, like Jasenia said. So in this age, like if you're teaching kindergarten or first and second grade, that's typically the age range that is associated with these grades. You'll see that in kindergarten, kids will need like a lot of physical touch and encouragement, right? Like they need a lot of like prompting, like, and encouragement. In first and second grade, they start to look for like fun, like they want Sunday school to be fun, and you have to promise them rewards, like, oh, if you can recite this, then we'll give you this, because that's how they learn, that's how they're encouraged to like do better, right? So one thing that I want to mention is that you have to learn in each grade how to teach according to their intelligence, right? Not to their knowledge, but to their intelligence. You need to understand how they learn, and then cater to that. So in first and second grade, we're going to see that some things that they should start to understand in terms of concepts, like religious concepts, is that they should feel love and reverence for God. That's a very simple thing, right? They start to show, more emotion. They should understand how to do things that please God, so we teach them like the 10 Commandments, and this is good and this is bad, right? Very simple, but they should start to understand these concepts during this time. Any questions or comments? Okay, concrete operational stage. Who remembers the age range for this one? Yes. 7 to 11, good job. And what are some things that we saw here? Yes. Good, yeah. Yes, and they're also still egocentric, good job. Anything else? That's the next stage. Yeah. They work the other way. So they take some things like a very simple point and they generalize it to everything else, right? So that's inductive reasoning. You make like a upside down triangle like that. Yeah. So we said generalization. Another thing here, I didn't mention it before, but this is the time that they really start to understand like uniqueness and individuality, right? They start to understand that they're their own person, and that not everyone that's around them in school or in their environment are the same as them, right? So this is like third and fourth grade age, so kids are likely to show off how much they know. So they're gonna, you always have those kids who like raise their hand every 2 seconds because they always have something to say. That's just because at this age they're starting to recognize their own individuality and they want to show that they are keeping up and they want to be able to share what they know. So in this age, they'll start to understand what sin is, like the concept of sin. Like I was saying before, they know what good and bad is, but they really start to understand like what is sin in this age. They understand the concept of like Jesus's death and resurrection. Before we'll teach them like, oh, Jesus, died on the cross and he rose on the third day. But in this age, they'll start to understand why did he do that? Go a little bit deeper. They'll start to understand repentance and confession as well. So again, we're digging a little deeper. There's still basic concepts to us, but it's going a little bit deeper for them. Lulu. Exactly. Right. Right. And they also start to understand why. Not so deep, but they start to at least think about why, right? They'll start questioning. A lot of times in this age, you'll see that kids like ask like the most random questions, but it's just because they're starting to really think about things and think where it's not, they don't just take things and then, okay, like for face value. Does anyone have any questions about this? No? Okay. Oh, I forgot, fifth and sixth grade. So fifth and sixth grade, they're gonna need to be challenged a little bit more, right? So during this age, they start to understand that sin is like separation from God. Again, every stage we're going a little bit deeper. But in this age, they want to be challenged, right? So like in elementary school, the lessons are very basic. We tell stories, and it's very like fun and simple. But in this age, they're gonna ask those deeper questions, and they're gonna want to feel like they're being challenged by their Sunday school teachers, or else you're gonna lose their interest, right? Okay. The formal operational stage. Um, the Trump picture is kind of a clue as to what we see in this stage. If you can pick up on that clue, I put that there for a reason. It's not just funny. I mean, I do think it's funny, but who can tell me the age range for formal operational and some things that we see? Samantha. 12 and up. Okay, good. And what do we see? Why is that Trump picture there? Christina. Good. Yeah. It's that deductive reasoning, that like those schemas that we were talking about. So it's very simple. It's a very simple way of explaining that, but like yeah, they start to think more abstractly, right? Anyone else? No. Okay. Yeah, so more abstract thinking. And they begin to think about like real world societal problems, right? Things like moral issues around the world, religious issues as well. This is the time where people start to dig deeper into that, and then that continues on for life. But it starts at around 12 years old. Okay. And then think about topics with deeper insight. So those are the 4 stages. Okay. The 4 stages of cognitive development. Does anyone have any questions about that, like in general? Like I said, there's so many different types of development, so I tried to break this one down as simply as I could. Again, it's very dense, there's a lot that we could cover, but I wanted to keep it simple. But before I end, I did want to talk about types of learners because I think that's also important and it has a lot to do with like the cognitive piece. So there's an acronym called VARC. Has anyone heard of VARC or different types of learning? You're nodding your head, Christina. Do you want to share anything or you just heard of it? You want to have a go? Kinesthetic, yeah. Yeah. Auditory, good. Yeah. Uh, no. So each letter stands for something. So it's Christina, right? Yes. Christina said visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, so we're missing the R. Does anyone know the R? To give you a clue, it's like a dash. It's like this and this. What, Nina? Oh, no, but good guess. What'd you say? Read it, yes, reading and writing. That's it, yeah, good. Huh? Should reasoning. So, yeah, each person has a different way of absorbing information. Has anyone taken like these quizzes in school? I remember when I was in school they did them. Do you guys, I'm seeing head nods, yeah. So we should also think about that when we're going into, teaching Sunday school and working with kids is like not every method of teaching is going to work for every kid. Some people are really good at teaching one way and other people are good at teaching another way, and it's good to have all of those things so that kids can absorb as much as they can. And there's no right or wrong way. It's just, again, different minds work in different ways. So the first one is visual. So these are students that need to see to learn. So this is through diagrams, through pictures, through videos, charts, really like colorful graphics, right? That's how they learn. Also, like not just like pictures of information, but also seeing like facial expressions, right? We learn a lot through watching people and how they talk, whether that's with talking with your hands or the different faces that you make. It says a lot about how you're communicating. So visual is a really good one and probably the most popular one. Next is auditory. So these are students that need to listen to learn. So they learn through discussions, they learn through talking things out. I don't know if anyone like reads out loud, but when I read, I have to read out loud or else I don't absorb any information. Also, like when I'm talking through, like if I'm doing math, when I'm like writing the numbers out in the problem, I'll like say what I'm doing. I'm an auditory learner if you couldn't tell. But yeah, things like that will help auditory learners a lot. They listen also to people's tone and people's pitch while they speak, and that helps them understand the message that they're trying to get across as well. The next one is reading and writing. So students that need to read or see words on a page to learn. So these students learn through writing, making PowerPoints, flashcards, lists, anything that they can write out and use words for. And then lastly is kinesthetic. These are students that need like a hands-on approach to learn. So these kids will often have a hard time sitting through like lessons and things like that. They always want to be up and moving, which is hard in Sunday school because it can be distracting. But if you can incorporate like an activity at the end of lessons or some sort of arts and crafts or things like that, depending on the age group, anything like that, that will really help these learners. They can become distracted by like their own movement too, so a lot of times these kids are going to be like bouncing their legs or they need to be fidgeting with something during lessons. So they learn, like sometimes I know people that when they read they have to be like walking around, like pacing. Those are kinesthetic learners. People that have stress toys while they study or while they're learning. Arts and crafts, drawing pictures, like if they draw the pictures themselves. Some people listen to music while they're studying or while they're learning. These are all kinesthetic learners. So that's the 4 types of learning. Does anyone have questions about that, or in general? I wanted to leave enough time to answer any questions that you guys may have. I'll try to answer to the best of my ability. Lulu. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you can be more than one type of learner. Um, more than one type of learner. Usually it's like a spectrum. So usually it'll say like if you are more than one type, it'll be like I'm full about experimental work. Right. Any other questions or comments even? No? Do you have a question, Marona? You look like you have something you want to say. Yeah, so I know I included like 0 to 2. Obviously, we don't really like have Sunday school for them; they're too young. But for pre-K, you just have to keep it really simple. You have to remember that their attention span is not that long. Even my attention span is not that long, and I'm an adult. So keeping things very simple, repeating everything. Repetition is huge in that age because if you say it once, it's in one ear, out the other. But when you repeat it and you present the information in different ways, so maybe through a picture, and then through a story, and then through an activity, that's how you're going to get the information to stick best with them. Yeah. You had, oh, sorry, Bruno. Why do they get bored? Who, like pre-K? Yeah. I think it's just, one, it has to do with attention span, and two, it has to do with the way that information is being presented. I think lessons, even for high schoolers, really shouldn't go past, I mean, maybe I shouldn't say this, I'll get in trouble, but like past like 25 minutes, it's, unless you're breaking it down in different ways. Like if I start for like 15 to 20 minutes with like speaking and then we have some sort of activity or some sort of video, it's engaging different parts of the brain, but when you're engaging one part of the brain for that long, the brain kind of, your ears start to tune them out. Um, yeah. So imagine if you guys feel bored in your Sunday school, imagine what like these little kids who don't have the mental capacity feel when you go past like half an hour. Yeah, not even 15. Like 5 to 10, yeah. Not to say that you have to give like a 5-minute Sunday school, but again, just remember to switch it up in the middle, you know? Yes. Right, yeah. Anyone else? Yes. I think it depends. Like, what do you mean by different? Like a learning disability or just like a different learning style than most of the class? Yeah, that's a good point. Sometimes if you're not, it could also be is it a language barrier or is it like a cognitive thing? Yeah, sometimes we think that, oh, if we just like lump them all together and do all the same thing, that they're all going to react the same way, but that's not always the case. Unfortunately, we can't make an individual class for each kid and custom tailor everything, but that's why maybe week to week even, it doesn't have to be all in the same lesson, but week to week making sure that different teachers are teaching in different ways or that each lesson looks a little bit different. That way, like maybe one day, all the visual learners did really well with this lesson, but next week we'll make sure to cater more to, this person or this group of kids. You know what I mean? Yeah. Just said, yeah. So if you notice that, a specific kid might be struggling or to understand or keep up, or they're not really engaged, you can always ask them after, kind of just like, after Sunday school's over, pull them aside and say, like, ask them how they're doing, ask them if they're understanding what's going on, if they have any questions. Ask how you, like, what, maybe instead of being so direct, you could say, what do you like about these lessons? What don't you like about these lessons? And from that, you can gauge where's the gap, right? Where's the barrier? And then you can go off of that. It's hard because like they might not always be honest and they might just be like everything's fine, but you can play around with different ways and you have to be really observant, right? Like a lot of kids are not going to come out and tell you straight up that they're having a hard time understanding because they might not care. So you have to be observant and you have to pay attention to them and make sure that you're picking up on those clues too. Yeah, and then go from there. Lulu. Yeah, that's a really hard one. Like I was saying, like more like those kinesthetic learners, especially a lot of like boys, a lot of young boys will have like a lot of boys have like ADHD and they like can't sit still. Um, so it's important to like recognize when a kid, and it's also like, is it like a one day thing where that day they're just feeling extra hyper, or is it consistently that they're always hyper and they always can't sit still? If it's a one off thing, then they need to sit down and they need to be respectful. But if it's a constant thing that you're seeing, then maybe you can factor in like a little break, like a 1 minute, like just stretch, like, okay, everyone stand up, stretch, sit back down, depending on the age group too. Or if that kid like really needs like some one-on-one time, like he needs to like go do a lap, you can like go do a lap and come back. Something really quick and like a little break that they can get up and like move and then sit back down. You know what I mean? Again, it depends on the age, because if it's like a kindergartner and you go take them out, they might be like, oh, we're done, I'm free. And then they'll go run around. But maybe starting at like second, third grade, you can explain to them, like, okay, do you need a minute to stretch? And then let them do that and say, okay, but we need to sit back down after and we're going to continue. But everyone is different. Anything else? That's a whole other topic. Yeah, whenever you'd like, Abuna. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. It's it's definitely tough. I can always, discuss if anyone has any like specific questions. It's really case by case though, I think. Like I don't think there's a general rule, especially with autism. I don't think there's a general rule that will apply to everyone because autism is a huge spectrum and it presents so differently. Um, but yeah, if you would like, yeah, I don't know if I could like give a course. I feel like I'm not like that qualified to talk about it, but uh, definitely talk about like how it presents, how to like deal with those kinds of kids in general, and then you kind of like have to just hone in case by case beyond that. But yeah, I wouldn't mind doing that if you'd like. I think like generally, yeah. I think with like autism, there are certain signs and there are certain like things within that diagnosis that is like usually pretty standard, that it's not, you can't really play around with like trial and error with it just because it's like a very specific diagnosis. But I think generally, yeah, like with your kids, um, yeah. All right. Thank you guys. Thank you, Abuna, for having me.